Now we come to Ophiuchus. What do we do about him? When Thoth first gave me the information I'm sharing with you in this uh, Stars of Mu video series, it was in the 1990s, the mid-1990s, and he did not say anything about Ophiuchus. So I just the other day went back to him and asked if there was anything about that I should share here, because it is a very prominent topic. Most people believing it is another zodiacal sign. And so I wanted some information on that in order to complete my series here, because I wanted to have it completely rounded off. He informed me that the ancient Lemurians and Atlanteans did not consider it a zodiacal sign, a constellation that is a zodiacal sign. In other words, they did not consider it part of the cyclic function that all the other signs represented. Now, if you go far enough back in time, there wouldn't even be any these signs, that we're speaking of here. So this is a particular time in Lemuria, the latter period of time in Lemuria, when these signs were seen in the skies, recognized, and equated to these symbologies and these functions. So Ophiuchus, he was not dismissing Ophiuchus. In fact, he said that it was a very important celestial coordinate, but he did not define it as a zodiacal constellation energy, so to speak. And so I asked him more, please tell me more about Ophiuchus. What can I share with all of you about this? And so we see Ophiuchus obviously as representing very much a serpentine energy, a healing energy, and that's why it was associated with the healer that was called Ophiuchus in Greece. So these things can be read about and discussed in other formats. I'm not going to get into it here. But from Thoth's perspective, the serpentine energy has to do with undulating current that Ophiuchus brings to the planet. He said it was kind of like a stake driven through the heart of the primal earth and the primal humanity. This stake is not to kill, it is to transform, it is to expand, causing the being to arise and receive the golden spike in the heart. It's a transformation, a transfusion, if you will. And this transfusion is one of lifting the primal essence of humanity into the golden mean. That is the exactly right place where all of this comes together, so that the primal is not set aside. It's brought into the light. Because you see, the primal earth, the elemental earth, was not a creation in what Thoth calls the lotus reality. As before stated, the lotus reality is a term that Thoth uses to define the undescended world, what came out of the star systems, specifically the New Star Rigel, but as a combination with other systems eventually, and was like a lotus floating above the earth, and then connecting to the primal earth. And that began the descent into matter, and all of this that I've spoken about before. But the primal earth is what the lotus connected to. It was already forming. So we did not have a primality in the lotus reality, not as we understand it, not as we determine that word. In our physical world that we have now, we have a mixture of the primal and what came down from the lotus. But the primal energy, since it is not of the lotus is a thing unto itself. It would be if it weren't for the stake through the heart, for Ophiuchus, because that energetic alignment allows the primal reality to breathe the light of the incarnated lotus in the earth. It connects to it. See, primal doesn't mean bad or negative or dark or anything like that. Primal is simply primal. It is the creational soil, I guess you'd say, not vegetation, the creational soil. And as such, it looks after itself. It has one directive and one only: creation. Survival of that creation, perpetuation of that creation. It knows nothing else. Yet when it is brought into union with the higher knowledge, wisdom, the serpent curling around the tree of life, there is a reciprocation between those two realms. Now, the primal is still the primal. It didn't get transformed otherwise, because if it did, we wouldn't have a planet to live on. We couldn't function as we try to do. But what it did was allow the two to communicate, and where necessary, form a working partnership. That is done through the spike Ophiuchus. We could expand that and say, well, there are other things besides that, further up the ladder that causes the whole Ophiuchus thing to work like it does. But that final spike in the heart that allows the serpentine energies, the primal energies, to undulate forth and connect around the tree of life, around the Sephirothic experience of the higher realms. That is Ophiuchus. So his, if we shall call him a he, purpose is far grander than just, oh, are you the sign of Ophiuchus? Isn't that cool? And the healer, it has this energy and that and all of this. And those things, I'm not dismissing them, and neither is Thoth. Because if you are born between, what was the dates again? May and, I'm not going to try to say it here. I need to look that up. Well, seeing as how I do not know what the dates are, it's pretty obvious that I don't. Let's go to Wikipedia for a moment here. Ophiuchus and some of the fixed stars in it were sometimes used by astrologers in antiquity as extra zodiacal indicators. The constellation is described in the astrological poem of Marcus Manlius, and it gives this description, if I can possibly read it here. Ophiuchus holds apart the serpent which, with its mighty spirals and twisted body, encircles his own, so that he might unite its knots and back that winds in loops. But, bending its supple neck, the serpent looks back and returns, and the other hands slide over the loosened coils. The struggle will last forever, since they wage it on level terms with equal powers. Later in his poem, Manlius describes the astrological influence of Ophiuchus when the constellation is in its rising phase, as one which offers affinity with snakes and protection from poisons, saying he renders the forms of snakes innocuous to those born under him. They will receive snakes unto the folds of their flowing robes, and will exchange kisses with these poisonous monsters and suffer no harm. Wow, what a picture, huh? But okay. So I need to address this a little bit more. To begin with, there is no such thing as wrestling Ophiuchus, according to Thoth. And the Lemurians and Atlanteans did not see serpents as something to wrestle with. the serpentine energy, the undulating current, is life itself. The only wrestling going on is in the lower consciousness that deems itself in danger of losing its divine imprint if it gets too primal. And, well, there's some truth in that, but only because we allow it to become imbalanced. The actual energy of the primal is divine. It has its function, it has its purpose, but it is divine. And it's never trying to bite us or gobble us or eat us up or poison us. The only thing that causes us to fear it and to try to struggle with it is that we are in ourselves, chasing ourselves over the cliff all the time. We're kind of pushing ourselves toward that cliff out of fear. And when we see something wiggling around at our feet, we go, no, it's going to get us, it's going to get us. And we move closer to the cliff. Instead of saying, oh my goodness, this gift, let me allow it to move up the spine. Let me allow it to embrace the higher spheres and realms so that those spheres and realms can embrace it. And we can form a homogeny of spiritual oneness in the total universal flow of things, even though these are two distinctly separate realms. And they're not intended to be anything but separate at this point in time. The homogeny takes place on the higher levels of experience. So we're not in danger of being poisoned by the serpent. We are, nor is Ophiuchus helping us wrestle it. We are involved in a process of experience, in cycles, in functions that allow us resources for completion of one level to move into the other. But one level is not cut off and then the other begins. It revolves into the other, like a serpent moving around the tree. And it evolves in that nature. So back to Ophiuchus, the purpose it serves, bottom line, is to enhance the development of the spiritual consciousness as it interacts with the primal nature, so that it doesn't have to leave one compartment to go to another. In that way, the elemental body is allowed to evolve with the soul body. The soul, the higher soul, the elemental soul, when they join hands, as the higher soul moves into the body, and the elemental soul is part of the earth, comes into the body from the earth and doesn't incarnate on. But when they're in the body together, the higher soul is evolving the elemental body through that Ophiuchus spike in the heart. And as such, when the higher soul leaves, the elemental soul returns to the earth evolved, and it spreads that evolution back into Gaia. So you can see just how important Ophiuchus truly is.